Hello, everyone. I'm Tina from the Joy Within the Journey and Nurse Leadership Solutions, and I have with me a wonderful nurse today, Sierra. How,
Hello.
how are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous.
Thanks for having me on.
Oh,
Super excited.
absolutely. I've known Sierra since before she was even graduated, I guess,
Yeah.
from high school.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
16 or 17, I think.
Oh, wow. I've known her a long time, but I definitely knew her before she became a nurse. And now I'm proud to say that she is a licensed practical nurse.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah. So I started nursing. It was 2016 when I graduated.
nursing
And
school?
nursing school.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
Woo, makes me feel old.
Just a little bit. So I graduated in 2016. I got my boards passed within about a month of graduation. Wanted to get that done out the way. I've worked a little bit in long-term care. When I first started, I kind of went back and forth between a few different things just to see what I liked. But I eventually went back to long-term care. I've earned several different certifications in women's sexual health and teaching classes and doing other things to help with education. But yeah, so it's been almost 10 years next year, I guess. That's crazy.
So, what made you decide to go into senior care?
So, I'm definitely one of those people where, whenever you grow up, people are like, oh, you must have wanted to be a nurse since you were little. And I was never one of those people. Whenever I was 16, I started working in home health for one of my disabled cousins. And it was just one of those, you get paid for 4 hours a day to help out around the house and everything. And even then, I was like, I could never be a nurse. I would never work in a nursing home. I said those words and now I eat them.
How do they taste?
It's a sandwich. So I went on to get my CNA after doing some private duty in home health. I took care of a couple. It was an older couple in Pacific, Missouri, and the lady had dementia, Alzheimer's, and I kind of was a caregiver for both of them for a few years. And as I worked with them, the daughter of that couple was actually a registered nurse, an old school registered nurse who went to like a 30-month accelerated program, like back in like the 60s or 70s. One of the best nurses I've ever met. And she's like, Sierra, you should really go to nursing school. You should just try it. You're so good at it. You're young. And I'm like, oh, all right, So I went through East Central College here, local community college, to get my CNA. And they, of course, also were like, you really should try. And I'm like, I'll try. I'm homeschooled. I don't know if I'm going to get in. So I went and took the entrance test and I got in. And I was really surprised, but I was actually standing in in the home of the couple that I took care of when I got my acceptance letter.
Oh, how exciting.
Or my mom got the acceptance letter and she called me and she's like, do you want me to open it? And I'm like, yeah, open that thing. I need to know now. So it was just a really exciting moment. I'll always remember that moment. I didn't expect it and I definitely never planned on being a nurse, but I know now looking back, it was all a part of the journey and it was meant to happen. It was meant to be. So I've used my nursing experience in different areas of my life. One of the biggest things I always find I look back on more recently. So I've educated on insulin and level 1 medication classes, and I did that for almost 3 years straight.
Yeah, and you were a remarkable instructor. I don't know did you ever keep track of how many people you certified?
No, but whenever I added up, it's probably close to 200 or 300 people.
Yeah, I would think so.
It was a lot. Some of those months I would do 2 or 3 classes. And I think my biggest class, I had like 16 people in.
Wow, I can't even imagine. I had
nuts.
I had 10 in my last class and I was like, wow, I can't keep up with all of you.
Schedule a whole day to do paperwork.
Yes. No kidding.
Whole day to do paperwork. So much paperwork. But yeah, so I went through that and looking back, so my dad was recently diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, and I actually had saw the signs in him for 2 years. And, our stubborn nature, we didn't want to go to the doctor. But part of me almost feels like I had that experience because how much longer would my dad have gone without knowing or seeing those signs? So I definitely feel me being a nurse and doing the things that I've done were for a reason.
Right.
I don't know. My dad was diagnosed last year, and right before he was diagnosed, he was having like neuropathy signs and weight loss and all of your classic textbook symptoms. And I really don't know if I would have recognized those signs unless I became a nurse and did those classes and educated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when you're going through and learning all that material for insulin, especially, it's like refreshing my mind over and over and over again.
Yes.
And I'm just like, okay, finally, I can retain this information of the signs
Yes.
and symptoms of hypo versus hyper and everything else because you're reading it so many times. So that probably was really stuck in your mind. But you also had a grandmother you were close to.
I did. I did. My grandma was like my mom, or my best friend. I was homeschooled. So she actually homeschooled us for some of our time that we were homeschooled. And she became very, very sick. The last 10 years of her life, she struggled with COPD and CHF, was in and out of hospital, was in and out of skilled rehabs. And I definitely think, I look back, those were my baby nurse days. And right when I was getting my nursing license, I think my nursing graduation was like one of the last outings she actually went to.
Mm-hmm.
And I have a picture of her and I'm just hugging her so big in my nursing graduation. And she's just like, she just has this look on her face. She was so sick. She
Mm-hmm.
was very sick. And I think, I don't know, I just have to believe that all those experiences lead up to for a reason.
No, I 100% agree. I mean, as you know, my grandmother was like
Mm-hmm.
my BFF and we were so close. And I think that why did she suffer for so long with dementia? And then I have to realize how much I grew through that. Like I took care of her when I started at 16 and then we did these things at home and I wanted to learn more about it. And I had the same thing. I really didn't think I was going to go to nursing school. And then I went to nursing school. And then, of course, she ends up in senior care, which is my whole career has been dedicated to that and to giving back to those that took care of her. That's why I become so passionate about mentoring and leadership and everything else because it really takes that dynamic leader in order to be really great for that team so that team can thrive also. That's
Mm-hmm.
my word of the day, thrive. I've used that word like 3 times today.
Thrive.
So
I love that word.
thriving. It's important for everybody to be thriving.
Mm-hmm.
So you taught some classes for a little while and then you did some interim work for us.
I did. So let me think back to where I was at in that point. So when I came on doing classes in education, I stayed in that position for about 3 years, I think. 2020 hit in the middle of COVID. And when I was in that position, floating between different buildings, at that point that summer, it was really hard for me to see residents.
Mm-hmm.
That first part of 2020, from like January to July, when I resigned from that position, I think I maybe saw residents maybe 2 or 3 times because we were trying to minimize contact between buildings and prevent any spread. And that is definitely where I lost it and was like, I don't think I want this position anymore because it took the heart out of it for me. I loved educating and I love helping others learn and grow in this profession. But when you take away the joy and what fills your cup, what's filling your cup anymore? And at that time in my life too, I was trying to conceive and I was working several different jobs. And so I knew it was time to step away. So I did take a break from nursing. Ironically, I think it was 2 weeks after I quit that position, I got pregnant after a year of trying. So all that extra work and stuff was definitely taking a toll on me. And then I didn't think actually from there I would have come back to nursing, but I've learned to obviously never say never in my life.
You should never say never. No.
Because I said I would never work in a nursing home or with elderly. And all of a sudden, this is my heart and this is where I'm at. So I came back to nursing and I've been back. It's been almost 2-3 years again.
Really?
Already. Yeah.
Wow. So you're a director of nursing in an assisted living.
Assisted living home. Yep.
Which to me is a great stepping stone for an LPN is like to be able to lead that team because I know LPNs that can work circles around everyone and they're just so dynamic and they work well within the team. And so I think that's great that assisted living has that opportunity. And so tell me about leading a team in assisted living.
Well, it's different than leading a team anywhere else, I can say. Most of the time when if people ask me what I do and I tell them I'm a director of nursing and that I'm a licensed practical nurse, they're like, huh? How does that work? It is a whole different ballgame. And I will say if you've been in long-term care and you've only been in skilled nursing, you are missing an entirely different side of nursing. I always said whenever I came to this position, when I first came to the position, I was shocked because I had worked at other skilled facilities, and I didn't know that nursing existed where our elderly can actually thrive.
Right.
We'll use that
Right.
word again.
Yes.
But seriously, I always told all my students that, when they would come into assisted living coming from a skilled position, and I'm not hitting on skilled, but it's a different type of nursing. And it fills your cup. I think for me, it filled my cup so much more than skilled nursing ever did for me. When
Well,
I
because you
worked,
can interact with the residents so much,
you
and
get that
you
satisfaction,
know,
that joy
right.
of being able to actually make a difference versus, there's been times when I worked skilled nursing, and I held a position at a skilled facility in St. Louis for a year. And when I clocked into that job and clocked out, I was hit the ground running, and it was everything that I did to just keep people alive and medicated.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no joy in that. There's no feeling like that you're making a difference or that you're making an impact in their lives. So when I came to assisted living and I could actually see the impact that it was, that I could make, it was a different feeling for sure. And I, of course, fell in love with it right away. So leading a team in assisted living, as you know, some of my work history, I've led different types of teams in my
Mm-hmm.
life. And leading a nursing team was definitely entirely different.
Yes, it is.
Even coming in whenever I was doing it as an interim director of nursing, just coming in as more of a temp, it was much different coming in as full time.
Oh yeah.
You're stuck with me all the time now.
Yeah, you're stuck with me all the time. Doesn't matter. And by the way, I can't get rid of you either.
That's right. We're stuck with each other. So I think at first I was really finding my footing, stepping to the position, figuring out what type of leader I wanted to be. I know that I've held my ideals and my expectations as a leader generalized, but when you're stepping into a nursing field, and I will say, working out in these rural areas, we have a lot of younger employees, a lot of
Mhm.
people who are just experiencing life, should I say, for the
Right.
first time. They're gaining life skills. So I feel like in this position, in the time being, it's been an experience growing people as individuals and also growing us together on how we can function as a team and as a unit. And I think that's the biggest challenge. That's the biggest goal, is functioning as a unit,
Right.
because at the end of the day, we're all here with the same goal. We need our paycheck, but also we're here to take care of people and make a difference. And so figuring out how can we tie those things together and come together and work as a team and support each other when we have bad days, because all of us have bad days. And, stepping into a management role, you also kind of step into like a therapy role.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I didn't know I was going to be a therapist. No. But you're just really helping people grow, and they have to report to you when they can't make it to work or whenever they have something major in their life happen. So a lot of your team is really depending upon you and leaning on you just for that listening ear or that support or that guidance. And a lot of these people don't have other people.
Right.
So we're the team, we're the family. So it's been a very big experience. I knew stepping into this role, even though I had some leadership skills, I knew that this would definitely hone in and really sand and polish those leadership skills off, giving me a different perspective for sure.
So when you have someone new coming into senior care, because assisted living, a lot of times people have never done any other type of care before. They're coming new. How do you get them acquainted with senior care?
Throw them in. No. No. I think whenever we do interviews, I do walking interviews, and I always see how they interact with my residents. I always like to have them interact with, I'm giving my secrets, I guess. I always like them to interact with some of our most difficult memory care residents. And there's a few situations in where the interview went very poorly on the, talking side.
Yeah.
And then I get them out on the floor, and one of my most hardest residents just connects with them. We're talking some of the memory care residents who are nonverbal or word salad. You can't understand what they're saying. So you just have to read their body language. And whenever they're grabbing their hand or trying to hug them, It's almost like how dogs sense things, not to make that comparison, but people, I feel like that the body keeps the score.
They
The
can
body
take that. Yeah.
senses, they know.
Mhm.
So there's been times where I've hired purely out of the fact that their heart is in it and they have the compassion.
I always think you can train skill. Like in
Absolutely.
this industry, you can train them how to do most things. If you can't train them how to do one thing, you can train them how to do something, because a lot of things that we're doing, especially in assisted living, consist of housekeeping, basic
Hmm.
housekeeping things, and or cooking, or just activities of daily living that everyone could do. So even if I'm not the best medication management, maybe I would be really good over here in this department of, providing that gentle care, or cooking a great meal for, and liking to see people's faces when they take the first bite of something.
And I definitely think that's where and that's what I always tell my interviews too. We will take you completely green, and I like that sometimes even better, because then you haven't learned bad habits
Right.
from other
Oh, yes,
places.
absolutely. Some of
So
us old nurses have bad habits.
I know.
Yes.
But so when we're taking someone completely green, sometimes all they need is the heart and compassion. We can train you and teach you anything else, and we can find a fit for you. And I think one of the biggest things as a team leader, to make sure that what you're providing to your team is making sure that everyone does feel like their position is valued.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter if you're the kitchen or if you're the person who mops the floors or takes out the trash. We have to have somebody who takes out the trash. We
Right.
have to have somebody who's cleaning. And even as a nurse, if I don't have somebody doing that, that's taking away from direct patient care. So every part of the team is completely essential. Whether you're doing what you feel like is the most minute, smallest task, it all adds up, and it's all to provide the best care that we can.
One of the seniors I talked to today said one of the most important things is if people could just love and respect each other. And that is so important when we're in these teams, especially assisted living. A lot of times you have a little team, and
Very
that little
small.
team has to function as a family.
Hmm.
Like, you imagine this is going to sound sexist when it comes out of my mouth, but absolutely, I don't cook. So anyone that knows me knows I don't cook. So don't think of it this way. But let's say the mom cooks and cleans, and the dad does the grass and outside, and the kids have to do the laundry. It takes every single person in that unit to work together in order to happen. And if someone falls off that unit, it negatively affects the rest of the time, because it really doesn't matter if my house is clean if people can't even get to it because my grass is 10 foot tall.
Right.
So I mean, that's just how it functions in a family, and it's the same way in assisted living or any other team for that matter. When a lot of times in senior care and many other industries, it's always like, well, we're doing the best, we're the best shift, or we're the best team, or we're the best department. And it's like, you know what? But you wouldn't be anything if the other department hadn't done what they needed to do before you got here.
Exactly.
Or, so, and you might, have the best care that the nursing department provides. But if the housekeeping department is failing, nobody's going to care when they walk through that door,
Hmm.
because they're going to be like, this place is gross. I'm out of here.
Exactly. And the two sayings that I've always very held true to being a leader is, you're only as strong as the weakest link.
Mm-hmm.
Right there. If you have somebody who's dropping the ball, it's going to just domino effect. And the speed of the team is the speed of the leader. I have to show up and set the example. And anybody that we've grown in lead positions, we let them know that you're setting the example for the rest of the team. You're setting the pace for the rest of the team. I recently had somebody who came in brand new to nursing, completely brand new, mid-20s. And this also sounds sexist, but a male. Okay.
Yeah.
This is not a
Which is
male dominated
newer.
field.
It is not a male dominated field, but you are seeing a lot more.
You're seeing a lot more. And so, to be completely honest, I was very hesitant on that. In the interview, I hit very, very hard on personal care
Mm-hmm.
because that's usually the one task. Women, we're natural mothers, we're natural caregivers most of the time.
By genetics.
It's just in our genes. So I just wanted to be very thorough on the expectations
What
of
you
this
were going to be
position
doing.
and what you
Yes.
were walking into.
Mm-hmm.
And to my great surprise, he came in willing to just jump in and help in buildings he wasn't trained in. Once he kind of got his footing, I certified him, of course, with medication and insulin and everything. And it just totally blew me away.
One of the best nurse instructors, and he ended up teaching the CNA class in the skill building I was in, and he was just the best nurse. And I know my mom remembers him to this day. And his name was Tom. Shout out to Tom if he ever watches this. But he was fantastic, like just amazing nurse, and worked with the staff, and like awesome. But it is rare.
It's definitely more rare. And I think something you said, mentioned a minute ago about being in assisted living, having smaller teams,
Mm-hmm.
that definitely hits. When you're in a bigger 120 bed facility, there's quite a few, several dozen employees that you go through. Our communities are smaller, and I explain that as a benefit because we're smaller census buildings, because we have a smaller team. We are able to provide more one-on-one care and a more
Right.
personable experience for our residents. I have one girl, she left, and she only stayed on with us PRN, and she works in a doctor's office now. And when my residents go to their doctor's appointments, they're like calling her in so that they can see her
So they
and
can
say
see her.
hi
I
and
mean, that
give
is
her
great
hugs,
connections you can
you
do.
know?
So I love both. And I love both differently.
Mhm.
I always say skilled is my baby. That was where I was
Birthed.
born. eh,
We were
born.
birthed into skilled.
Um, and I love it, every minute of it. But I also love ALF for a different reason. It does have that more warm and fuzzy interconnection, but skilled has bigger teams and more people to support that team. You can put the gaps together more in a skilled building a lot of times. When at ALF you have a gap, you have a gap. It's a big gap.
It is.
Like, I don't think that the caregivers in ALF realize how important they are, because they're like, oh, I can call off work today, or I can, this job doesn't, like, I get paid the same much if I go flip burgers or something like that. And like, yeah, but do you realize how important you are as a person? And, one of the previous episodes, like, yeah, I wish we could pay him more. Everybody wishes we could pay him more.
Absolutely.
But how important they are as a person comes from the residents, comes from themselves, comes from everyone that is interconnected there. That's what makes the job amazing, is what you mean to the team and the resident in your building.
It does. And, I try to find different ways. I think that's an area leaders can always grow in and, shift in, is how to make people feel like, hey, your job is insanely important, because if you're not here, then we don't have anyone here to, provide for our residents. And having those smaller teams, it does make it provide more challenges whenever we do have call outs and things like that, because we don't have this big pool of employees that we can just call or message and say, hey, can someone fill this shift?
Please, somebody.
Please, somebody, SOS. So, it does present the challenge that we do work the floor when it comes to it, because if we don't have staffing to fill, then obviously director of nursing is going to be taking over those shifts. And, we were faced here recently with some staffing challenges, and me and the other director of nursing that I work with, we've tag teamed it every other night. And I mean, it's given us both a little bit of break. We're getting it covered. And we're not, murdering ourselves in the process a little bit. But.
And I think it's so important. First of all, it's great as a team leader to be able to do that, and to be willing to do that. That's servant leadership all in itself, of, my team needs me. I can't, some people get into, I'm going to force overtime, or I'm going to force this. And really, that just doesn't work in today's society, because it just doesn't.
It's really yucky too. There's nothing worse than stepping into a nursing field, and I've been on the floor as a charge nurse when my supervisors are telling me that I need to pick up this shift or I need to work that. And something I've always said to every one of my employees, I will always ask you. You always say no. And there are times when I'm asking my employees, because I have to ask. If we have an open spot, I have to ask everyone. But there's times where I tell people, no, you need to say no, or no, you shouldn't take this, or go home.
Because if you're exhausted, or they're exhausted, whoever's exhausted, they're really not providing the best care.
No.
After there's certain a time period that you're like, okay, even though I'm here, even though I'm functioning, I'm not
100%
giving myself 100%. And it takes 150% in what we do in senior care. And I hate to say that, but it really does.
It does. And your residents feel it. Your
And they feel
residents
it when you're tired.
immediately sense it when you're
A
off.
lot of times
or
it's not the employee that complains that they're tired. It's the resident that tells you as their leader to say, so-and-so needs to go home.
Mhm.
And if your residents are picking up that someone's exhausted, that's not a good
not
thing.
good.
That's not good.
Send them home.
But it happens
It
a
does.
lot.
It does. And I
Because
think
we give all in senior care. You know, you just give all.
you do. And a lot of people don't have that. I don't want to say don't have, but they're just so dedicated and in the work that they're too far in it before they realize they're burning out.
Right.
Or before they're realizing, hey, I need to take a break.
Well, you talked about that when you were talking about what you do. And I think it's important. Yeah, I just took a little bit of break myself. And because I'm just like, okay, I was 26 years into one company and 30 years as a nurse. And I'm like, okay, it's time. It's time for me to turn off the button for a little while and reset and recharge. And now I'm like, yes, now let's do this. What are we going to do different in senior care to make things good?
I think that every nurse, everyone in healthcare needs that, which definitely makes me wonder how some of these nurses that are just powerhousing through, how is their mental health? Well, I can tell you how our mental health is.
Yeah, let me see. I can tell you about some experiences. My mental health is good right now, but I can tell you about some experiences that was not so good.
It was tanked,
Yeah, it was tanked. And I think that is something we have to recognize. I think of all the time that I let PTO slide off, or I didn't take it, or I thought things were too important, like that I had to stay. But I also think of what it feels like when I take a week off, heal, and then go back. I always feel so much better going back. And there's nothing that would have probably happened in that week off that would have been okay. And that's the other thing is when people really are on vacation, we need to really let them be on vacation.
Absolutely.
And that was something I was never good at. I always had my phone. I always had my laptop. I was always going. And I just couldn't shut it off until I actually had to shut it all the way off. So do take the time to shut it off when you need to shut it off.
It is hard. And I feel like I've talked about this more with some of my colleagues, directors of nursing admins that I work with. We run 24/7 facilities. It'll always be here. It'll be here when you get back. It'll be here tomorrow. It'll always be here. And
fortunately, there's no fairies that run in and fix everything when you're gone for that week. But chances are there'll be a new set of problems when you come back.
Exactly.
But if you love it and you're energized and you're going, then it's a lot easier to handle. And if you have a solid team. So I always tell the leaders, focus on that team, building that team, because when you need a break, they'll give it. And if you notice they need a break, you give it. When you need it, they'll give it.
Absolutely. I have one of my day shift crews that just work flawlessly together. I mean, if I could just copy clone them for everyone.
I always had that team.
This team, I mean, I brag on them constantly. I brag to my superiors because without this team at this building, it would have been at a much different place because of the effort that they put in. And what were we just talking about?
We have no idea. We have dementia. Do you have a bed for us?
We might.
We were talking about the team. We were talking about take care of the team and the team will take care of you.
Taking care of the team. Yes, because, when you don't take care of yourself, then you operate from a very low energy point. And everyone around you will feel it. You'll start to be snippy. You might pop off and say something you wouldn't normally say.
I would never do that.
You might act from a place of desperation. So keeping your energy and what I say, my cup filled, is absolutely essential for a leader, because then you're going to be operating not from a place of love, which I feel everyone, if you're in long-term care, you should be operating from a place of love and compassion. And so being in this field, in order to provide great care for our residents, which is what we want, you have to be able to keep your nervous system in check and regulated, not let yourself get high strung or hypervigilant over things that you can't control. And keep yourself in a place operating from love for your employees too, because
absolutely.
We're helping them through hard times as well.
Well, I always looked at it as you take care of your employees and they'll take care of your residents. If you take care of your residents and forget your employees, next thing you know, you're going to be the only one taking care of your residents.
You're the only one left.
And then you're going to burn out, and then no one's going to be taking care of your residents. And I think that's why buildings get into the
The
it
loops.
loops that they do where they're trying to get better. They want to be better. They have good people that work there, but they all exhausted themselves, not working together. Because, everybody thinks that, maybe they have the answer. The next person thinks maybe they have the answer, and I can do this by myself. And you start putting down other members of the team, and next thing you know, they're putting down you, and then everybody's cup is empty, and there's no healing going on in between time periods. So,
and a lot of the time too, I've definitely seen where supervisors or leaderships rely too much on their strongest person.
yeah,
They dump too much on them, and what they don't realize is they're burning them out faster than anything. So there's a few people I know that if I ask them, they will immediately be there. And so there's times where I don't ask them because I know, no, you need a break, and you don't need to be
go home.
You need to go home and eat some chicken wings and watch your TV for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So if I was a new nurse and I was considering senior care, and you were going to encourage me to get into senior care, what would that look like?
Don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. Don't be.
I have
nurse.
A button for that. Me,
Yep, ding me. If your heart's not in it, don't do it. This is a job of heart. You have to have it. It's required. You'll work maybe a few months or a year or two if you're in it for the paycheck. This is not the field to get in if you're in for paycheck one, because it's not going to pay you that great. It's not going to pay you.
You're not going to get rich in any kind of teaching or nursing. Unfortunately, it blows my mind that if you're someone that takes care of people, that you're probably not on the upper end of the pay scale. But that you do have to go into it with, I want to make a difference.
You do. You have to have that pull, or you have to have what we always say, your why. Why are you here? Part of me, for my why, it's definitely changed, and it definitely evolves through the years, and I think it will always evolve. But I've always grounded myself to, well, now the more recent years, my daughter. I'm doing it for her. I'm doing it to show her what that looks like, being a mom who provides and who gives good care. And part of me also pulls to my grandma and my cousin, who I actually initially mentioned in the beginning of this episode. So he was born with myotonic muscular dystrophy, and he was born blue. They had to bag him as immediately as he came out. When he was born, part of his intestines had twisted, and they didn't catch it in time. It caused gangrene. He ended up losing almost the majority of his intestines. So he had a lot going for him first few days, first few weeks of life. They did not expect him to live past a year. This cousin is actually only, he's my first cousin. He's only a year younger than me.
Really?
He will be 30 this year.
Wow.
And he is still living. So part of me, through the years, there was so many times where he's not expected to live much longer. He's not expected to live much longer. And here he is turning 30 this year, beating all the odds. It's just insane when I think about it. Because, our childhood, they being the same age, our families prepared us for the inevitable in that situation, happen, right? What would happen? So part of me just really holds on to, what I've seen growing up, and just grounding in being that person for someone who's helpless and someone who needs it. And I just think that, I just pray that one day when I need that someone who has the same heart will be there to give that to me.
Right.
I mean, that's all that we can hope, is that because we're all going to need it one day. We're all going to be in a situation.
You just said the magic word is hope. Like, you have hope that he does well and continues to do well. And then, as you go into nursing, I think you hope that you can make a difference. And
you do.
I really feel like long-term care is somewhere you can really make a difference, because you wrap your arms around the entire family and the person. And, I've mentioned before in podcasts, it's about holistic nursing, because you're caring for every aspect of that person and everything around them.
Very much.
And that can be very rewarding, especially, memory care. You mentioned that being there. And to me, that's where we can make a huge difference, because we can give those people a really bad day if we are not being great caregivers, or we can give them an amazing day where they're living their best life. They might not know that they have dementia. They might just be thinking that they're 10 years old and enjoying every aspect of their 10-year-old day. And but it's up to us to give it to them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that is where people don't realize the great impact you can have in senior care.
And like you said, a holistic approach with the families, so being running a memory care and just an assisted living home, the difference in the family dynamics,
Yes.
So I will say, in just assisted living, we do see a lot of people who have very hard transitions.
Oh, yes.
When they're moving in with us, they're a lot of the time dealing with a great significant loss of a loved one, maybe loss of the fact that the caregiver that was
Independence.
caring for the independent loss, a lot of the time it's because a caregiver or a family member just can't simply do it anymore.
Right.
It's too much. On the memory care side, I have almost an entirely different approach. And even though we have memory care that's also assisted living, which will
Right.
also throw you for a spin.
Yeah.
Most people don't understand that there is memory care. So they're like, your memory care. I mean, I've literally argued with people from the hospital before. Yes, but we're assisted living. So there's still, requirements there, but it's an entirely different approach. And one of the first things that I usually talk about with my families who are admitting their loved one to a memory care facility is the fact that part of them starts to grieve the loss of that loved one at a
Long before.
much different time. You're checking your loved one into our memory care, but you started to grieve them probably a few years before.
Right. And you're giving something so precious to someone else to care for. And you're having to put a lot of trust and have a lot of hope that they are going to do what you want them to do with that person.
And
a lot of times
them.
families don't even know what that is that they're looking for. They just know that they can't do it.
They can't do it. Exactly.
And that's hard to admit too, the guilt that comes along with that. And so, as a family member that put someone in, I didn't personally, but my aunts did put my grandmother there. The guilt doesn't ever go away because you think I should have done it. I should have been able to care for her. She would have cared for me. But at some point you can't, your bucket is empty, like we've talked about. And then then in memory care, you are, you're trying to get a little bit of that bucket back so you can just visit and give back, pour into their bucket. Because again, the memory care person might not realize how bad they are. It's the family members that are going to realize that. And we talked to a great person this morning, Dr. Getz, that I was telling you about. And she talked about that. She said it's much harder on the families than it is the person. And I 100% agree.
It is. Absolutely. I've seen several different dynamics. I will say I love assisted living. I love long-term care. Part of my heart, though, will always be in memory care. I don't think it's a job that because right now I'm not technically director of nursing over my memory care anymore. I was until our other nurse kind of stepped in. But it's not something that I feel like I can do all the time. And I think that comes back to filling the cup. It can be very draining when you have back-to-back very, I don't know, lack of word, just sad cases where, I had one family who came in. The mom developed dementia signs in her early 50s.
Wow.
And the family had cared for her at home for years.
Don't say that because I'm getting really close.
Sorry.
And I feel like I have dementia already most days.
But, the family cared for her for years at home, and it actually took over 2 years just to get a diagnosis.
Yeah.
One of the struggles that they went through, and this was something that really opened my eyes to a different kind of side. In the earlier signs, she knew that something was wrong and she was making doctor's appointments and she was forgetting to go to the doctor's appointments. So after she had missed so many, her doctor canceled her.
Oh my goodness.
They never followed up to see why she was missing the appointments. Why is she missing? And so it took almost 2 years for her to get a diagnosis. And I thought, what just another flaw, just another check on the checkboard of flaws in our healthcare system.
Yes.
Number one, but just seeing the trauma that family went through and the struggles that they went through, because it was traumatic. You're watching someone that you love so deeply become someone you don't know.
Absolutely. Anymore. And I think that's one of my goals is to put those resources together, kind of be a resource to help those families, because it is so hard out there right now. And
it is
in the healthcare to figure out where to be, who to go to,
Mhm.
how to get help.
Mhm.
And, of course, there's a lot of people that want to help you, but sometimes it's hard to even know
You
who is
trust
a
these
legit
people. Mhm.
helper and who is just trying to get your money.
Your
And I hate to
money.
say that, but
Mhm.
my dad was been in the hospital this week, and why he was in the hospital for 24 hours, he got 6 spam calls on the hospital phone,
Oh my gosh.
the phone in your room when
The
you're in
hospital
a
phone.
hospital bed, and it's ringing off the hook with people from another country trying to sell him something. And I was just like, are you kidding me? How does this happen? But they're like, it's just a phone number, so it could be on any spam list like anything else. And like, this is so challenging for seniors because they can't even trust, hey, you have an appointment or you owe a bill, you can't even
Right.
trust who's calling
You
you.
can't. You can't.
So
Another thing too that I've run into where there's just no direction out there. Actually, in the last few weeks, I ran into this. Um, People have no idea, when you have a family member, someone who's at risk for memory care or who's having memory decline, getting the legal steps in place,
oh,
getting a durable
absolutely.
power of attorney set up, a living will, those things in place.
That was actually our last episode,
Was
and
it?
I said I already have someone that I'm going to have on a future
To talk about those
podcast
things?
to talk about
Oh
those
my
things
gosh, it's
because
amazing.
it's crazy that like we tried to get my grandma set up, but back then it was a little bit easier. But now there's a lot of complexity that comes into how do you protect yourself and how do
Mhm.
you get ready?
Mhm.
And no, a lot of times nobody knows.
There's not information out there. A lot of the time we have people coming to us and they don't have any of that in place. And we're like, ooh,
Well, and it's too late a lot
it
of
might
times
be
by
too
then.
late. It might be too late. Mhm.
Legally they're supposed to be able to say, okay, here's a power of attorney. And I've been in situations where it's like, here's the power of attorney, and they're like, do you agree? And that person's agreeing, but I know that maybe that person doesn't understand what they're agreeing to. So we've
Exactly.
passed that point.
Mhm.
And I of course not signing my name on the dotted line, so it really doesn't matter. But I'm just like, I'm just not sure how legit that or legal that would have really been. And there are
Mhm.
resources for when you get to that point, and that's what we're going
Mhm.
to talk about. But um, overall, it's gets a lot more complicated if you don't do it in advance.
It absolutely does. And we've seen some sticky situations where families don't have this in place. And especially when it comes to a married couple who both are experiencing memory
Yes.
issues. Now, who is taking care of the other
Yep.
and
That's
who is
exactly.
making the decisions?
We talked about that one too because that was a previous the third episode, I think, was a family member that had two people in the nursing home at the same time,
Mm.
and that's challenging. Yeah,
And it happens. You don't think it would happen to you, but
it happens.
what happens when it happens and then you're not prepared, you have nothing set up and
We've
um
seen it all.
I mean, and
We've
I
seen
think
it all.
it's just important to be an advocate as a nurse too, to encourage others. It doesn't matter how old you are in your life, you should have a living will set up on what your wishes are.
Well, yes, I 100% agree. Because I do feel like you, we don't communicate about that tough
No,
subject of that it could happen. It could happen to any of us at any
speaking from
time.
a person who does not have that set up.
Who does not set up? I admitted that last week on episode 7 that I admitted that I don't have it set up, and I absolutely should have it
I
set up.
absolutely should have it set up.
So
Absolutely. But, like I have an instance where I have had a resident before where she was in the process of actively dying and her power of attorney had no idea what her wishes were.
mm,
Had no idea what funeral arrangements she wanted, whether she wanted to be buried or cremated. Those were conversations she just never
never
had.
had because nobody wants to have them.
Nobody wants to have them, but then you are putting someone that you care about in a really difficult
Well, and that
position.
comes back into that caregiver's guilt a little bit of, am I doing the right thing? Am I
Exactly.
not doing the right thing?
Hmm.
You don't really know.
Hmm.
Well, Sierra, do you have anything like you would like to close with?
Um, I feel like one of your interview questions was, when was a time where you made an impact in
Yeah.
someone's life?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about that. And it's hard for nursing because we just run like chickens with our heads cut off most days.
We don't keep score about who we're helping, but
Organized
we do
chickens.
know that there's we do know that that we have a lot of impact, but sometimes when you have a bigger impact. And so share
Sometimes.
a story.
So I definitely feel like I know that generally we do make a large impact, but I I think one of the biggest impacts that I've seen that's been really fulfilling for me in long-term care and for families too, one, the continuum of care. Whenever you're in long-term care, and if you have the same people there, you're having the same person taking care of your loved one every day.
Mm-hmm.
We become very close to these people. And recently there was a situation where I had actually admitted a resident, and we're 2 years into that admission that she's been with us, and she's passing. And so it's been a very full circle experience being able to help her from the day she walked in the door, holding her hand through that transition to the other side. I don't know if it was the answer you were
Yeah,
wanting.
no, absolutely.
Might be a little more
I mean,
morbid
we
for
all
some.
we all know that we all know that we connect with some people more than the others. There's just no way not to. And so, no, I don't look at it as morbid at all, because I think it is extremely important to give peace at that moment. There are moments that it's not peaceful, and we don't want any part of that. We want it to be a peaceful moment. We're all going to die. Why can't we do it in a way that is more peaceful and we're more prepared for, and that people can, celebrate our life versus sit around and mourn our death. Of course, there's going to be mourning. We all know that there's going to be mourning, but also can sit back and, think about all the good times and not remember this horrible experience at the end. So if as a nurse, you feel like you can make that impact to bring that 2-year stay into a,
you just wouldn't have that working in a hospital setting. That's long-term care,
and you can only get it in long-term care, because in a hospital, that person would come in and they would pass away. You would not know what they did for a living. You would not know who their names of their kids. Sometimes you wouldn't know that they like their coffee black. And we know that. We know that what they like and what they don't like, and that if they're having a certain behavior, of what it means to us versus what it means to them. There's no comparison in any other medical area of nursing that I think that you can beat that. And not even really at home, because at home you just get too invested that you can't step back from it. You get caregiver burnout because you're the only one, versus in a setting you're rotating people in and out, the same people, hopefully, but you're getting to know them, and you get to come and visit, and then you get to leave and go rest, and then come back more energized. And that nurse gets to connect and have that empathy, but not the daughter or the caregiver that is watching,
fatigued,
that has a 50-year history versus a couple year history. So
and that's something I always say to our resident families when they come in. You're bringing your loved one here. You're entrusting us to care for them, and we want to take whatever we can off of your plate to help. I always tell them that, because there's things that you can do in the process of moving your loved one into assisted living or a long-term care facility that's still making more work for you, So, and that's just usually because of lack of education. This is a whole new field for them. They don't know. And, for me, I just take it upon myself. It's my job to tell them and to give them their options. So I always tell them, if there's something that we can do to take off of your plate, because you've already been caregiving for them for 10 plus years at home, and now it's time for us to kind of help and step in. So anything that we can do to take something off of their plate, even if it's just scheduling an appointment for them, sometimes that's strenuous.
Right. I agree. When families work together with the care team, it just makes a world of difference.
Oh my gosh.
And I always told my team, if the family can go home and sleep at night, we're doing our job.
We're doing our job. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for being with me today.
Of course.
And thank you all for listening. And till next time.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.